Inside a cave, only screams could be heard, shouting that a magical beast was there. Someone was begging for help while screaming for everyone to run. A young man was giving it his all just to stay alive. His name is Yaching. He is a level 0 collector. He stares at the magical beast in front of him and thinks he can't even scratch the demon's head. Despite all his attacks and efforts, he dealt a total of 0 damage to the spirit wolf. He thinks about how he survives by picking up the trash left behind by hunters. As a level 0 is considered by society to be nothing more than a burden, a useless person and trash. A monster prepares to attack again, and even knowing that his chances are basically 0, he doesn't flinch and gives his all, aiming for its head, but it's no use. His wooden shield is easily shattered and the monster lands a hit. As he's attacked, he thinks to himself that he's truly living like trash. On the brink of death, he looks at the monster and thinks that this isn't right. He screams with all his might that he refuses to die like garbage. He attacks once more, and suddenly a message appears. You dealt a critical hit to the spirit wolf. 1 damage dealt. In City G, there's a rank C abyssal portal. A man begins to approach the portal, and another comes running. Y runs through the portal with something in his hand, while a monster chases after him. A hunter attacks the monster and defends him, saying the collector is too slow. The protagonist is a veteran collector and works every day recycling the trash left behind by hunters who fight monsters because the abyss supervisors don't want those resources to fall into the hands of ordinary people. After all, those crystals are rank C and worth over 50,000 yuan. Suddenly, someone shows up and steps on a box, calling the protagonist a brat. The hunter says they will inspect the dungeon resources one by one and warns that if Y tries to be clever and hide a crystal, he'll face a hefty fine and might even be arrested. The protagonist asks his boss to calm down, saying he's been doing this for a long time and knows all the rules. The collector's job is usually done by those at level 0. If the combat team can't handle the monsters, level 0 lives are in immediate danger. And it's not an exaggeration to say the job is worth a life. The pay for returning from a dungeon is 300 yuan. Each collector gets 1,000th of the value of the trash collected, around 600 yen. But since the agency takes 30%, they're left with about 540 yuan. The protagonist sigh, saying his debt is over 670,000 yen, so he needs to work much more. Suddenly, one of the collectors calls Y and says there's a big job with a 31,000 commission. He asks if he wants it. The protagonist is a bit surprised, asking if it's really 3,000 as that's very high. His partner says he always seems to need money. So, if he wants in, he just needs to apply to the group. He doesn't waste time and stands up saying he'll join and will apply right away. On the bus, people were asking if the public mall in Shanfang is that Abyss Republic they've been hearing about in the news. They say it's rank A. That's why the rewards are so high. They heard that several groups were wiped out. No one made it out alive. One of the workers asks if it's another subcontract, and they say it probably is. Besides cleanup, there are other important missions, too, like retrieving the gear of the eliminated teams. Some workers get a bit irritated, saying those businessmen are really cunning. They question who allowed capitalists to commercially manage the abysses. The protagonist just listens in silence, staring out the window. The evolution of business. 10 years ago, the abyssal portal descended from the void, bringing the abyssal beasts with it. Only those who could level up gained special abilities to defeat these beasts. As the demonic beasts were killed, people discovered that the abyss held not only energy products like magic crystals, but also weapons and many mysterious items. When a new world was discovered, humanity went into a frenzy and began exploring the abyss. Many traditional companies went bankrupt and public funds were redirected to support this new market. He had tried to find work in every possible way. However, he always heard that no level 0 people were accepted. He went to the hospital and the doctor shouted at him, saying the hospital wasn't a charity. And if he didn't pay up soon, he could take his mother and leave. In despair, unable to afford his mother's treatment, he begged the doctor for forgiveness and asked for just a few more days to get the money. Inside his house, the landlord starts banging on the door, shouting for the protagonist to open up because he's already 2 months behind on rent. Everywhere he went, it was always the same thing. They told him to disappear, that he wasn't needed, that he was just trash and should vanish. This drove him into complete despair as he needed money to pay for housing, and most importantly, his mother's treatment. The job market is unprecedentedly bleak for level 0 players who can't level up. Basically, they're already considered useless by society. Suddenly, in the midst of all this desperation, someone shows up and offers him a loan card, asking if he needs money. With no other option, the protagonist looks at the person and takes the card. The person says he needs to pawn the most valuable things he has, which in this case are his organs. Back in the present, he sighs. One of the workers looks at the protagonist and says he heard that he borrowed 1 million from a loan shark and lost it all in the stock market. And if he doesn't repay what he owes, he's going to lose a kidney. And on top of that, he still has a little sister who depends on him. Not to mention the hospital bills are extremely expensive. They say it looks like that kid just needs to die already since there's no way he can pay off that debt. And even if he stays alive, he'll live the rest of his life as nothing but trash. Finally, the bus arrives at the location and the combat group was already waiting. One of the fighters says all the collectors are too slow and they get off the bus already apologizing. Another fighter tells them to hurry up and emphasizes that it's not his fault if anyone dies. Everyone starts climbing and heading toward the portal. He also gets off the bus and looks at the portal, thinking that this time he'll work hard to earn money and make it out alive. He steps through the portal and enters the underground city, the Dungeon Republic in Shunfeng, a rank abyss. He looks around thinking it's his first time entering a rank B abyss. Suddenly, the hunters hear a noise and some magical beasts appear ahead of them. A shield bearer shouts, calling his partner and saying that monsters showed up as soon as they entered. A magic user steps forward and says, "This is too easy." Since they're just low-level spirit wolves, he starts summoning flames around him. As the wolves attack, he fires a fireball, causing a large explosion and pushing the other wolves away. The shield bearer tells everyone not to let their guard down, as demonic beasts can ambush them in any dark corner. Another team member asks what their destination is. The shield bearer points upward, saying it's the 5th floor. A hooded member says it might just be an illusion. However, the first floor of that dungeon seems 5 times larger and 3 times taller. The guy with glasses says that's abyssification, a replica created based on the real world, but whose internal structure has been completely mutated. He asks where the bodies of the groups that came before them are, as there's no trace at all. He tells the collectors to try and find the bodies and not just wander behind, stressing that no matter where a level 0 goes, their only use is being trash. The protagonist starts walking through the place a bit distracted, and the magic user was crouching right in front of him, tying his shoes. Suddenly, it doesn't notice and trips over him, falling face first to the ground. The magic user gets a little irritated and yells that he should watch where he's going. Yeah, scared, apologizes. However, the magic user grabs him by the shirt and slams him against the wall, saying hitting trash disgusts him and that it scared him because he thought a monster was attacking. The shield bearer tells Locken to leave the collector alone because they have a mission to accomplish. Locken looks at the protagonist angrily and throws him to the ground, saying if he knows he's trash, he should stay away. Yeah, still on the ground. Thinks that guy is just a jerk who looks down on others. Lauchen keeps ranting and asks the collectors if this is what they call a professional team. They start walking and the protagonist thinks they are just burdens to society, useless trash. Those are the collective terms society uses for level 0s. However, they have no idea that the protagonist experience is at 99 out of 100, and he's about to level up. He starts walking alone through the dungeon. Suddenly, he and another collector come across a demonic beast. The collector screams that it's a demonic beast and starts running, telling everyone to get away. Yes, starts getting a little worried, saying, the hunters let a spirit wolf escape. That is a critically injured spirit wolf. The protagonist looks behind him and sees a level 1 wooden shield and a level 1 stick. The wolf tries to attack him. Y thinks that monster is nearly dead, but his group ran away. He runs and tries to grab the shield, but takes a direct hit. Still, he doesn't back down and says this is exactly the chance he's been waiting for. He lands on his feet, holding the shield and the stick in his hands. He charges at the monster without hesitation. The wolf is alone. He manages to land a hit on the monster's head, saying it should just die. However, the damage dealt is 0. The demonic beast only gets angrier, and the other collectors, who were a bit farther back, say that Ya is extremely dumb. They point out that the protagonist didn't start in this field yesterday, so he should know that only hunters can deal damage to those demonic creatures. While fighting the wolf, he thinks that he already knows that his stats are level 0, strength 1, agility 1, intelligence 1, willpower 1, constitution 1, luck 1. He drops his bag and tries to run from the wolf, thinking that with such weak attributes, he can't even scratch a weak monster. He turns around frustrated, thinking that this is something he knows better than anyone. And it's precisely because he understands this so well that he has to go even harder. He dodges one of the attacks and charges again. Somewhere else, Lauchen starts laughing, saying that when level 0s see a nearly dead beast, they'll tremble and piss their pants. The shield bearer says they could line their pockets just by killing a few monsters, but those pieces of trash can't do a thing to a demonic beast. No wonder they're worse than garbage. He says they should keep the more valuable items and leave the rest to the collectors, telling them to clean up what's left. Another hooded member warns the boss that it looks like another beast escaped around there. Suddenly, screams are heard, saying a demonic beast appeared and they should run. The hunters start laughing, saying it's exactly as the boss predicted. Lao Chun, still annoyed, says that the purple item has already been claimed by him and warns everyone to stay away from it. Meanwhile, deeper in the dungeon, noises are heard from all directions. He is being attacked by the demonic wolf and badly injured begins to panic. However, he gathers all his strength and yells that he refuses to die like trash. He manages to stab the monster with his stick, landing a critical hit and dealing 1 point of damage. With that, he defeats the wolf, which collapses in front of him. On his knees, he starts panting and even in excruciating pain, begins to laugh, shouting and celebrating that he managed to take down at least one. Suddenly, he hears someone approaching. Lock-in starts mocking him, saying the loner managed to defeat a low-level wolf. He grabs Yao by the shirt again and yells, asking if he's playing hero and whether he thinks he's immortal. Lao Chin keeps yelling, saying they didn't spend money just to drag the corpse of a worthless idiot like him. However, despite hearing all of this, the protagonist smiles. A hunter's career doesn't follow just one path. When you reach level 1, even a level 0 can change classes and gain access to a hidden class more easily. But for that, you need to find ways to gain experience and level up. Yet, for a level 0 who can't deal damage to demonic beasts, that's like climbing a slippery mountain barefoot. Even so, he has spent years risking his life, seeking a critical hit to gain experience, accumulating little by little, rising slowly. But he never gave up until reaching 99%. A message appears. Repeated kills. You dealt 1 damage to the spirit wolf. You gained 1 experience point. With that, he finally reaches 100%. Completely injured, but happy, he says, this is the only way to gain experience. The conditions have been met. The system shows that his experience points went from 99 to 100 and that the requirements for leveling up have been fulfilled. Lao Chen is shocked and shouts that someone like that actually managed to change class. The system congratulates him, saying he finally reached level 1. An aura begins to envelop his body. In the end, he obtains the class Abyss Collector, and his max level is 1. Lao Chen looks at that and bursts out laughing. He asks what kind of joke of a class change that is. A garbage collector is still a garbage collector, and the max level is 1. He taps Y's shoulder, apologizing because he just can't stop laughing. He says this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and even so, the protagonist managed to get a class that literally means trash. He keeps laughing and says it's perfect for him. Suddenly, Lao Chen stops laughing and gets serious, staring directly at Y, saying all the other collectors are gone, and that's why Y will finish the cleanup alone. He turns and starts walking away, mocking and telling the other fighters that they won't believe what just happened. The protagonist looks at his injured hand and asks if collectors really are weak. He thinks that if the max level is 1, then he won't be able to use attributes to level up. He looks at the wolf's corpse and wonders what a collector's ability is. Suddenly, his eyes start to glow, and the wolf's corpse begins to emit a strange energy. The system says, recyclable trash found low-level spirit wolf corpse. Ye is a bit surprised to see this system screen, so he decides to say yes. Suddenly, his eyes begin to glow purple, and several hands appear out of nowhere. A powerful energy and intense pressure take over the area. He looks back and asks if this is a collector's ability. The hands go to the wolf's body and begin pulling it in. A message appears saying the trash is being disintegrated until the disintegration is complete. He asks if that's all and if it's over already. Suddenly, a hand reappears and informs him that he gained spiritual boost, emphasizing that he received 3 attribute points. The protagonist asks if he can get skills and attribute points from corpses. Curious, he opens his attribute panel. The hand says he needs 3 agility points to use it, which surprises him since it's only 3 points. He goes to the panel and says that if that's all it takes, then he'll put everything into agility, raising it to 3. The system informs him that he met the conditions to use the spirit wolf's ability and asks if he wants to activate it. Without hesitation, he says yes. Suddenly, he starts feeling something strange in his body. When he opens his eyes, he's a bit confused because he didn't feel any result. Someone yells at him, saying he needs to go clean up that mess, and he yells back that he's going. Afraid of getting scolded, he starts running. But as he steps on the ground, he notices something different. His speed is extremely higher. Not used to it, he trips over a route and falls to the ground, asking if it was the ability that did that. The system screen appears again, informing him that the spiritual boost is on cooldown. He gets up, takes a deep breath, and looks ahead. But when he sees it all, he's surprised. There are several wolf corpses there. With his new vision and collector ability, he can see that all those bodies are recyclable. Yo wonders if he can take attributes and recycle abilities from beasts because that's the only ability of an abyss collector. He starts using his ability again, saying that maybe it's his only ability, but it's extremely powerful. While his skill Devour, all those corpses' messages keep appearing, saying he gained 4 attribute points, 3 more attribute points, and so on. The protagonist says that when he first touched the spirit wolf's corpse, he gained the spiritual boost ability. One of the hands reaches him and delivers an energy orb, saying he received 1 attribute point. He's surprised and wonders if that really is an attribute point. He points out that apparently devouring the same type of corpse doesn't grant more abilities. Additionally, the reward for recycling bodies of the same species gradually decreases. He asks all those hands if he needs to recycle new corpses to gain new abilities, and they respond yes. He's happy, saying that this class really didn't disappoint him. He opens the attribute panel again, and is shocked to see he already has 111 unassigned points. He stares at the panel and wonders what he should raise since points are no longer a problem. Yes starts smiling and says it's best to distribute the points evenly. So he begins raising all his attributes equally. In the end, his attribute panel looked like this. Name Yang level 1 max class Abyss Collector Strength 20 Agility 20 Intelligence 20 Willpower 20 Constitution 20 Luck 20. Meanwhile, the group of hunters continued fighting, saying that only those last 2 monsters remained. After defeating them, the shield bearer asked Lao Chun if he's serious about saying that the collector changed class to collector. He wonders if that hidden class wasn't on that class list he always checks. Another member says it's not that important because every year a new class is added to the list, but the most valuable ones remain the same. These so-called hidden classes are usually just a joke. Lao Chun says that considering the protagonist level is at most 1, then he must be an F rank, just a bit stronger than a level 0, so there's almost no difference. The group leader says they should let it go, continue what they're doing, and stay alert at all times. They keep walking and finally reach a higher point. However, the moment they look at what's ahead, they're completely shocked. A completely dark monster is standing before them. The leader says the mission target has been found, as those are the remains of the captain and the falcon hunting team. The girl with them is confused, saying there's a pile of them, and not even in that shopping mall, especially not on the 5th floor. The man with glasses approaches one of the bodies and says the abyssification hasn't even lasted 48 hours, and yet the corpses are already completely dehydrated. He says it's possible their essence was drained using some kind of magic. The woman says that up until now, they had only encountered low-level spirit wolves. So, if the falcon hunting team was B rank or higher, this is really strange since they were all defeated and killed there. They start hearing a strange noise, and the leader looks to the side and is completely shocked as several monsters begin appearing out of nowhere. He yells that it's not just wolves that are there. Meanwhile, on TV, the news report announces an important alert. An abyssification has occurred at Shunfeng Public Mall. Initially rated as a grade B mutation, the current number of missing people has already reached 217. Back inside, the leader shouts in fear, telling everyone to retreat immediately, saying it's an ambush. Lane starts using his flame and yells that he had found it very suspicious not to see the bodies of the previous hunting team. But it turns out they were all piled up in that mountain of corpses. The leader says the weak demonic beasts along the way were only there to lure them deeper into the dungeon. As they defend against the first wave of attacks, they begin to see something much bigger starting to move. The leader looks and says that the true voice of that dungeon has appeared. It's a carnivorous plant from the abyss, rank A. Lao Chen shouts for everyone to look up, because the hunters who had died came back to life and were attacking. While all this is happening, the protagonist is still recycling the corpses of the low-level spirit wolves. After recycling several bodies, a system screen pops up in front of him, saying he reached the novice collector milestone by recycling 50 corpses. He starts laughing, saying he finally unlocked an achievement. The system informs him that he'll receive the following rewards, which makes him very happy because he wasn't expecting any. His rewards are a low-grade heart collector and a very ordinary dagger. He's extremely disappointed, saying that while the dagger might be usable, the rewards are really bad. As he's there examining his rewards, he starts hearing very loud noises, looks up and wonders if something's coming toward him. Screams start growing louder in his direction, and a zombie begins running to attack him, which terrifies him. He dodges the first strike and backs away. The system says he triggered an agility check, emphasizing that he successfully evaded with a flashy move. He shouts that the monster scared him so much he thought he was going to die. He begins to analyze his own body and feels like he's become significantly more agile, wondering if it's because of the attribute points he distributed. He clenches his fist and smiles, thinking he's finally become stronger. However, the monster that attacked him charges forward again, giving him no time to react. Just as he's about to be hit, his body reacts extremely fast. He manages to dodge another attack. He pulls back a bit and thinks it's not just his agility that's improved, but also his strength. Feeling confident, he activates his spiritual boost ability and charges forward, saying it's his turn to attack now. As he rushes in, he thinks that he's finally become the hunter instead of the prey. He lands a punch on the monster, sending it flying, saying that this time he won't just tickle his opponents. The system appears again, saying he triggered a new strength check, noting that he caused a breakthrough in the target's defense, doubling his physical damage. The monster starts groaning in pain and shaking. Y begins to smile and says that this is his new version and it's way better than the old one. The system screen appears again, saying that thanks to his 20 points in intelligence, the protagonist's perception has been significantly enhanced, allowing him to detect hidden traps and weak points in his targets. The monster starts moving again, and now, with his new analysis ability, Y can see that its essence level is parasitic and that its weaknesses are fire in its neck. The monster lets out another roar and charges full speed, but this time instead of dodging, Y also starts moving forward. The monster attacks with everything it has, but the protagonist manages to dodge and slips under it, going for its back. He starts summoning his dagger, thinking that the monster's weak point is its neck, and with a quick strike, he manages to hit the nape of its neck. The system notifies that he triggered another luck check. The effect of the common dagger was activated, and the target received a bleeding effect. Yes, steps back a bit, and realizes he cut directly through the root on the monster's neck. The system notifies that he killed the parasitized human. The purple liquid on his hand begins to evaporate. The system says he triggered a constitution check and was able to resist the poisoning effect. That liquid simply starts disappearing from his body. He looks at his dagger happy, saying that his first time killing something on his own was a complete success. His collector ability identifies the parasitized human and says he can be recycled, too, asking if the protagonist wants to do it. He says yes, and his skill begins devouring the corpse. Shortly after, the system says the parasitized human has been successfully recycled, and the protagonist acquired a passive ability, toxic evolution. His new skill, the effects of being poisoned, are reversed and randomly turned into a beneficial effect for the user, requires Constitution 15. Seeing this, he asks if that means he can drink spoiled potions as if they were normal. He uses the skill card, and the system confirms that the passive ability toxic evolution has been added. In addition, he received 5 more unassigned attribute points and also disintegrated the spoiled potion. The system warns that it's highly toxic and shouldn't be consumed, but he looks at his skill card and thinks that with his new toxic evolution ability, the poison will turn into something very beneficial. With that in mind, he starts drinking the highly toxic potion to see what happens. The system informs that due to toxic evolution, the critical effect was transformed into a healing effect, and all the damage he had taken up to that point was instantly healed. The system also notifies that he acquired the buff essence. All attributes doubled for 10 minutes. It says the randomly gained effects are so strong that he can feel his strength gradually increasing. He opens the attribute panel once again and remembers that after increasing intelligence to a certain number, he gained more info about his targets. So he decides to use the 5 attribute points on intelligence. Currently his base stats are strength 20, agility 20, intelligence 25, willpower 20, constitution 20, and luck 20. However, because of the buff he received, his strength is at 40, agility 40, intelligence 50, willpower 40, constitution 40, and luck 40. While analyzing his attribute points, he hears another sound approaching. He starts wondering if it's more monsters. When he turns around, he sees it's not just one monster, but a small army of them. He stands still, thinking that he was always called a burden to society. Trash, useless. That's how everyone always treated him. But now he can proudly say, his name is Yaching, an abyss collector. He activates his ability and grips his dagger tightly, saying they can all come at him because he only has 2 times to fight, daytime and nighttime. Meanwhile, on the 5th floor, their fight was still going. However, they were starting to feel overwhelmed because the entire Falcon team had been parasitized. The leader tries to defend himself, but realizes that even though those monsters are just the bodies, they're stronger than they were alive, not to mention the boss itself, the carnivorous plant from the abyss. He shouts to the whole group that they need to retreat immediately. They start running while Lock-In tries to clear a path with his fire magic, but the woman gets hit in the back and the man with glasses had already been killed. The leader just keeps running, saying the monsters are still chasing them no matter what they do. Lock-In, trembling in fear, thinks those monsters are too strong and they won't be able to do anything more. With that, he just keeps running nonstop. The shield bearer tries to block an attack, while Lao Chen keeps running. He thinks he only came there for money and gear, so dying there would be a waste. Suddenly, The team leader starts being enveloped by strange magic and can't move properly. He looks at Lock-in and asks what he's doing, saying they're a team. Lao Chan apologizes to his boss, but points out that he needs to hold the monsters off as long as possible. He abandons his leader to his fate and starts running, saying that when he comes back, he'll spend a little more on his funeral. The shield bearer, lying on the ground and unable to do anything, just tries to call for help, but is completely ignored by his companion. While running, Lao Chin thinks he won't lose anything if he escapes now, because at least he still has the equipment he managed to grab. And at worst, he'll just have to come up with an excuse for his whole team being wiped out. However, he crashes into someone and falls to the ground. Seeing the protagonist startled, he covers his mouth. But once he realizes it's he starts getting nervous, saying that once again that trash kid got in his way. The protagonist begins to get angry, asking if Lao Chin really betrayed all his teammates just to survive. Lao Chin, watching Y's ability in action, asks if that's all he can do. Suddenly, he starts thinking that he can't let the protagonist leave, because if he reports him to the committee supervisors, he'll likely be condemned. He shouts at Ye asking if he doesn't want to become stronger and stand out from the others. Then he says this is the moment and tries to kick the protagonist, telling him to go and become monster food. However, the kick has no effect on Ye. The system appears saying that the strength check failed. The kick was invalid and will have negative effects. Lao Chin falls to the ground in pain, screaming and insulting the protagonist, asking what he's doing. Y begins to release his aura, cursing Lock-in, saying that he may be trash, but anyone who abandons their friends is worse than trash. Without hesitation, he begins using his ability. Lock-in starts shaking and screaming, "What is this?" begging for help and calling for his mother, but he is dragged away by the hands. The ability notifies that the trash triangle is in progress, but the trash is not recyclable. The hands throw him back to the ground, and the protagonist says that apparently not all trash can be recycled. Suddenly, another notification appears saying the recycling skill has been upgraded. Now, the target's useless abilities can be recycled with their consent. Additionally, Y receives another card saying he is the Spellmaster, the 3-minute experience card. If the target is unconscious, consent is given by default, which is very convenient. He uses the 3-minute experience card. With it, he gains control over all flames. The Fireball skill requires 15 intelligence points, and he has 50 in total. By activating the Dark Effect, the Fireball evolves into Grand Flame Explosion. Several monsters begin moving again. He looks back and sees they're getting closer and closer. He starts trying to figure out how to use the Fireball skill and tries to remember how Lao Chan did it last time. When he uses it, it creates an extremely powerful explosion. The flash takes over the entire floor, and all the monsters in front of him are completely disintegrated. He gets irritated with himself, saying he didn't have time to recycle the bodies and begs them not to turn into smoke so easily. However, another monster appears at the top of the stairs and stealthily advances behind him. But Yes senses the presence of someone else and dodges at the last second. He moves away from the opponent, who keeps pressing forward without giving him any time, but none of its blows can land. Ye grabs his dagger again and begins fighting on equal footing with that monster. He starts thinking that he still hasn't learned any close combat skill. He looks back and sees the body of the shield bearer, thinking that might work. He says the shield bearer wouldn't want to be resurrected by that boss after death, so maybe you should help him become stronger. Using his ability, he begins to consume the entire body of the shield bearer, thus gaining the golden shield. Immediately, he starts using the shield, and in the middle of the opponent's charge, he spots a weakness and rushes in, smashing the monster's head with the shield and winning the battle with relative ease. Without wasting time, he apologizes to the former hunter who had been parasitized, but says he needs to recycle that body, too. He asks the former warrior to rest in peace. Upon absorbing the body of the former hunter, he gains the Dagger Demon card. Now he can use a dagger like an assassin and unleash a flurry of stab attacks. He quickly uses the card and gains another ability. Upon absorbing it, he says the dagger now feels more flexible in his hand. A story is told. Their fight was brutal. The committee states that the protagonist's mission is to find the Falcon group and bring them out of the dungeon. Instantly, the response to that is yes. The committee says that if their bodies aren't found, the mission will be considered a failure and no payment will be given. The battle continued, and with each moment, the protagonist gained more abilities. By recycling the bodies, he managed to gain speed, and his strength and agility attributes increased significantly in addition to becoming immune to control skills. The man telling the story says he already knows he won't get anything. The committee asks if he has found the bodies of the Falcon group. He replies yes, but that they've all been recycled. The committee asks what he's talking about, and the man says all the corpses and monsters were taken into the abyss by that person. At the Abyss Supervisory Committee building in the interrogation room, Lao Chun is sitting in front of the evaluators, trembling with fear. The committee says he was the only survivor from that dungeon, so the person he's referring to doesn't exist. And furthermore, there's something very strange. When they found Loken's body lying on the ground, his level had been reduced to 1, something that's never been seen before. Driven mad, Lao Chun starts screaming that it was exactly like he said, his abilities were recycled by that person. And that's the proof that he's the trash collector, but he doesn't sound credible saying that. The committee states that the Abyss's energy pollution level is so high that it's possible he was recycled and then spat back out, which is what's causing hallucinations. That's the main theory proposed by the assassination team. Lao Chun keeps yelling that it's not true and insists he's telling the truth, that he wouldn't lie about it. He insists that everything really happened. The trash collector did all of it at the entrance to the Rank B Abyss. After all that, the protagonist sold the magic crystals on the black market, but received only 30% of their value. Since crystal trading is monopolized by large corporations and private transactions are illegal, the black market charges 70% as a handling fee. The magic crystals he brought were barely enough to pay what he owed the loan sharks from some time ago. However, since then, there have been no more incidents. He looks at his own hands and thinks that he's a bit afraid of using his recycling ability in front of others, as they might report it to the supervisors. Not to mention that he awakened an extremely strange class, so it wouldn't be impossible for them to lock him up for a year to run major experiments. The protagonist concludes that he needs to earn as much money as possible while he's still a free man. Among several other people, the group leader says that Abyss just appeared and everything is still extremely new, so everyone needs to be aware of the risks involved. That's why the rewards will be doubled. He emphasizes that only people with a class qualification and a rank higher than B can sign up for the mission. He asks the leader if he thinks someone like him would qualify. The leader asks what his rank is. The protagonist pulls off his hood and says he's a level 1 collector. Everyone starts laughing and the leader slaps his hand, saying that even a piece of trash like him has the nerve to consider himself a classed individual. He says the protagonist should get in line with the rest of the trash. However, that's exactly what Yet wanted. He thinks that if everyone there believes he's weak, they'll lower their guard and probably place him in the back of the group, acting as a simple support. And in that case, even if he secretly collects bodies and trash, no one will notice. It's a dangerous plan, but a brilliant one. Suddenly, another person arrives and says they should get going. People start commenting that she's the daughter of a famous family, the one who awakened a Godchas in class. The woman tells the leader that if they take the protagonist, then they'll have enough people. Others keep commenting that she's the rising star of the hunting group, and also known as the Chosen of God. Her name is Lu Xingren. The leader still hesitates a bit, saying that kid is clearly level 1, and on top of that, a novice without any proof or qualification. Jingren says it doesn't matter if he's a novice, and it wouldn't matter even if everyone was level 1 because they're all just there to be numbers, so they're all the same as trash. The leader agrees with her and says their only responsibility is to protect her since that place belongs to her family. So, it's only natural that she has the final say. He breathes a sigh of relief, thinking that was a close one, as he thought he'd be kicked out again. However, this isn't the first time he's acted like simple trash. Suddenly, Xingren looks at the protagonist without saying a word. He gets a little uneasy and starts wondering where he saw her for the first time until he remembers it was back when he hadn't awakened yet around 2 years ago. She was in danger and her weapon had broken. But he stepped in and without hesitation managed to land a critical hit on the monster, finishing it and saving her life. Still shaken from the situation, Xingren asks if he's really a trash collector. Then how did he manage to kill demonic beasts? Suddenly, Yes starts celebrating, shouting that he did it, that it was his first time. He finally managed to earn a single experience point. He turns and asks if she's okay. Shunrin says she really had heard the rumors, but didn't believe anyone was actually trying to level up that way. She asks if it's true, if he's really trying to gain experience like that, and why. The protagonist says the reason is obvious. He needs money. He bends down to pick up the magic crystals, and she stands up saying she can't believe someone is actually doing that since that method could cost him his life. But the only thing that caught his attention was that the monster gave a lot of magic crystals. He turns to her and asks what she really knows because people with good classes like her always think they're superior. So, how could she understand how hard the life of trash like them is? He continues doing his work while saying she's the one who abandoned the group and went off alone. He asks if she's really trying to waste her life facing that many demonic beasts since she charged at them without hesitation. That makes him wonder and ask if she's really trying to prove something. She gets irritated and says yes, because she needs to get stronger as she wants to be the first person to conquer that place. Yeah, asks what place she's talking about, but she changes the subject and asks him to tell her the real reason he wants a class so badly. Without thinking twice, the protagonist says it's because of his family. He explains that he wants to become stronger so he can protect his whole family. Smiling, she asks for his name, and the protagonist introduces himself as Yaching. Still smiling, she introduces herself and says she truly hopes to see him succeed someday. She emphasizes that once he manages to get his class, he should join her group so they can conquer that place together. She extends her hand to him, but the protagonist is a bit confused since it's the first time he's actually been treated like a human and not like trash. Even so, he ends up accepting and takes her hand, saying it's a deal and that she better not hold him back when the time comes. She says she'd like to see him again after he changes classes since she just killed 30 demonic beasts on her own and he only killed one. Actually half, since he only landed the finishing blow. Suddenly, some people appear there. They say they've been looking for her for ages and question how she could sneak into the depths of an abyss. The reality of the world returns to normal. People start cursing at the protagonist, saying he shouldn't go near her again. They grab Xingren and start dragging her away, saying the president is furious and nearly ended everything. And even though she asked them to wait, they completely ignore her. At the last second, she throws a crystal up, telling the protagonist to catch it. And with a smile on her face, she says it's his reward for killing half a monster. He turns around and starts walking away, thankful for that. However, he doesn't exactly remember what her name is. He asks if it's Liu Xingren. The leader smacks him on the head, shouting that yes, she really is Xingren, and asks where he's looking, ordering him to get moving and enter the portal. He looks at her and says he'll do his best not to be a burden to everyone. She looks at him without saying anything. A few seconds later, she says it's fine and asks everyone to grab their gear and get ready to enter. Once everyone is ready, they begin heading toward the entrance of the abyss. Make it back alive. He remembers that when he fought to escape the abyss last time, he mastered the warrior's shield, became an assassin, and also gained berserker skills. But what truly made it worth it was that he finally obtained a boss-level skill, super regeneration of man-eating plants. Because of the way he distributes points on his radar chart, no matter what career he chooses, he'll have no weaknesses as his strength, agility, intelligence, willpower, luck, and constitution are all balanced. His attribute points are equally divided among those 6 stats, and the total he can gather is around 100 points, especially since he was the only one who cleaned up all the recyclables in the last abyss. Still, he starts to wonder what level someone would need to be to match 100 points. He uses his skill observation Eyes attribute perception. He observes that the strength attribute of the man in front of him is only 12 points, and his weakest stat is intelligence with just 1 point. He thinks that if the strength of a normal human is 1, then a warrior with 12 points is approximately 12 times stronger than an average person. But his own strength is already at 100, meaning he's around 100 times stronger than a regular human. As he analyzes all this, they keep walking until something moves and a loud noise is heard. The whole group looks back and the leader asks what happened and whether it was a small earthquake or something like that. In reality, it was a trap. However, you manage to hold it back with just the strength of one arm, pushing the wall back and preventing it from crushing someone. He remarks that the structure of that underground space is very unstable. Suddenly, someone else arrives, shouting that they found a chest, drawing everyone's attention and allowing the protagonist to breathe a sigh of relief for not being noticed. When they reach the chest, the leader says this is total crap, because they don't have any assassins in the team, and that chest looks like it's rank A. The protagonist raises his hand and says he can open it. However, the whole group is confused as to how a level 1 person could open something like that. He walks up and effortlessly opens the chest, leaving everyone stunned. He thinks that opening that lock is as easy as eating, but the rest of the group can't believe he did it so easily. The leader says that lockpicking skills like that can only be learned by assassins above level 5. Ye explains that a level 1 collector can learn a bunch of useful skills because they come across lots of unopened chests while cleaning up trash. The leader ends up understanding and says they'll divide the items once the mission is over. For now, they should keep moving. The group agrees, but they hear a small sound. He asks the woman next to him to stand still for a second, because it seems like there's something ahead. He throws a rock, and the walls quickly begin to move this way. He triggers a trap and prevents a fatal incident. The woman looks a bit uneasy and questions whether the protagonist is really level 1. He asks her not to think too much about it, saying they just happen to run into something he's good at. He finds a lot of traps while picking up trash, so he usually suffers because of them. That's how he ended up unlocking the trap perception skill, and there's nothing strange about it. Xingren was behind the 2 of them, and hears the whole explanation. However, she remains silent, saying nothing. All 3 members of the group end up accepting the explanation, saying they understand. The system appears saying, deception, check success. Target has become more persuadable. The protagonist begins to wonder if this is the power of having 100 intelligence points. The leader starts treating him a little better and gives him an item, saying it's a reward, and tells him to use it proudly. He says it's the one-handed broken mace, a normal class weapon that can be used by a level 1. Y starts thinking that apparently his evaluation in the minds of the others still isn't very high. The leader tells them to keep moving until they finally arrive at a large room with something in the center. The group asks what the deal is with that and wonders if it's some kind of secret treasure at the end of the abyss. However, they start laughing, saying that getting there was extremely easy and begin to think it might be the kind of abyss with reward rooms, the type that only contains items and no monsters. The system explains that this is the reward room, a room with no monsters containing only some treasures, a unique type location within an abyss. Jingren asks the group not to get overconfident and to pay attention to places where monsters might spawn. One of the group members walks up to the plaque and holds it in his hand, saying, "There's no way that stone plaque is the only thing in this abyss." He turns, letting his guard down, and asks if now that they found the last treasure, they can leave. However, the chalice in front of him begins acting strangely. Suddenly, it starts to emit an absurd amount of blood, and the system announces that the blood trial has begun. Shingren curses that member, calling him an idiot, and points out that this isn't an abyss reward, but a trap. She says the thing in front of them is the blood nightmares. Shingren opens her inventory, grabs her sword, and shouts for everyone to get ready to fight. The blood monsters begin surrounding them. The protagonist says that to avoid exposing his attributes, he should fight using only 20% of his power. At that moment, the ring on his finger is the trash weakness ring. Its effect reduces all the wearer's stats to a chosen percentage. When he first got the item, he was furious, wondering what kind of trashy ring only serves to lower your stats. But now, he thinks that no matter how useless something may seem, it can always become extremely useful. One day, the battle begins. Ye uses his spiritual dash and charges at the monsters. Even limiting his strength to 25%, he destroys everything in front of him with a single strike. This catches Shingren's attention, and seeing that he did all that with just one move, she realizes everything around him is being destroyed. One of the monsters takes advantage of her distraction and tries to attack her. However, Shingren hadn't let her guard down, and with one move, she destroys the monster. Meanwhile, the Horned Warrior is struggling. He asks what's going on because even after blasting the monster with a hit, it begins to condense and take human form. The Blood Nightmare in its original state is fragile, but when it attacks humans, it strengthens based on the opponent and mimics their form. Even so, the warrior doesn't back down and manages to slash the monster in front of him. The mage shouts, praising the attack, but the monster, even wounded, doesn't fall. It counterattacks, cutting off one of the warrior's arms. He falls, screaming in pain. And the mage, in despair, says decapitation doesn't work. So how are they supposed to win against those things? The monster prepares for the final blow and attacks with everything. At the last second, its sword stops inches from the warrior. Shingren had completely frozen the monster and asks if they could be just a little less useless. She touches the monster and shatters it entirely. Shingren points out that this is just a bloody nightmare and says they're embarrassing themselves, just as expected because a piece of trash is still trash in the end. The monsters keep attacking. With the warrior on the ground, the mage tries to attack, but shouts that there's no time to cast spells since the monsters are moving too fast. Y says that if swords don't work on those monsters, then they'd better just barbecue them all. He uses Grand Fire Explosion, destroying several monsters at once. Once again, the entire group is left speechless. The mage screams that Grand Fire Explosion is an S-rank spell, and casting it instantly is basically impossible. She asks if something's wrong. How can a level 1 player do that? More monsters begin appearing and advancing. They let out a loud roar. However, Y does the same, and his roar stuns the monsters. Berserker mode is a skill exclusive to berserkers. Speed is increased by 100%, strength as well, and damage taken also doubles. With one punch, he completely explodes the blood nightmares, but he notices blood fragments flying all around him. When he looks back, the monster he just destroyed starts to fully regenerate, but with something different. The mage, still frightened, says that monster duplicated. The creature begins to evolve, transforming into a blood nightmare king. The group starts shouting, asking how a king-level monster could appear in a B-rank abyss. That's why they're certain something's wrong there. He says that monster can mimic its target's form and grow stronger by facing stronger enemies. That blood nightmare absorbed the protagonist attributes and instantly evolved into a king-level monster. The blood nightmare begins its assault, but manages to dodge. As he pulls back slightly, he wonders if that monster's attributes are enough to match his own. Because if that's true, it means there's no way to win by overpowering it. Shinran steps forward and calls the protagonist a useless little fish, telling him to get out of the way because she wants to handle that powerful opponent. The monster starts attacking her too, but with her speed, she's able to dodge and begins climbing up its body. With her freezing sword, she attacks and begins freezing parts of the monster. Yo is surprised to see that she can use domain-level ice control, but it still isn't enough. With its other hand, the demon strikes, landing a direct hit and throwing her to the ground. She gets up and, even without major injuries, thinks that it's not going to work this way because she's still too weak. Some time ago, she was at the edge of an abyss, and her guards warned her that the abyss's energy was highly unstable, asking if she really wanted to go in alone. Shinran kept preparing and thought her goal was to conquer that place once and for all, the highest darkness level of the Tower of the End. However, her growth rate is still far below that of her brothers and sisters. She stands up and keeps thinking that honestly, to be a princess, she doesn't even come close to them. The blood nightmare keeps attacking, and she begins gathering energy around her, thinking that if she can't easily eliminate the abyss, she's not worthy of inheriting her family's name. Lu Xingren opens her eyes with intense focus and creates a barrier around herself, managing to block the attack. A flag appears beside her, and she slams it into the ground. That's the Frost Banner. The system appears and says, "Haste." All allies within a 30 m radius gain a 50% speed boost. The ground in front of her starts freezing and quickly reaches the monster, freezing it completely. With her boosted speed, she charges forward. She thinks that the ice demon specializes in restraining water-type monsters. Even if it can't kill, it'll no longer be a threat if it's frozen. Shinran uses Comet Strike, an extremely powerful blow that manages to slash the monster. The protagonist watches and says that this must be the legendary God-chosen class. However, he's still uncertain, wondering who is stronger, the Kingle Blood Nightmare or the God-chosen Knight. As she finishes her attack and pulls back slightly, she looks at the monster and starts to wonder if her attack had any effect at all. The part she managed to cut falls to the ground, but the King-level Blood Nightmare remains intact. It continues attacking, but none of its blows land. While fighting, she thinks that even though she's an S rank, her strength still doesn't come close to her older siblings. She keeps dodging while questioning her own power, thinking that even though she carries the Lu name, she always feels like she's being left behind. And clearly, she is the weakest member of the entire family. Always mocked and ridiculed, called the disgrace of a Lu family, with people questioning how they could have such a weak sister, saying she should just stay home because the abyss is too dangerous for someone so fragile. With all that weight and those repressed feelings in her heart, she gathers her strength, thinking that she wants to become the strongest, even if that means starting with the beginner's abyss. Because as long as she keeps challenging greater hardships, she'll be able to surpass everyone one day. And to surpass everyone, she must be capable of facing every challenge by herself. She lands a blow on the monster's head with all her strength, but it's not enough. He looks slightly alarmed, and she notices something behind her. The monster lands a direct hit, slamming her into the ground with immense force. From that attack, she begins coughing up blood. The team's mage starts panicking, shouting that the monster was able to defeat even Shinran, an S-rank hunter. So, everyone needs to get out of there immediately. The Blood Nightmare prepares to deliver the finishing blow to her. But the protagonist won't allow it, and once again uses his firepower, destroying one of the monster's arms. The severed arm flies toward the rest of the group, who scramble to dodge. Thanks to that attack, Jinger manages to get up. He was going to face the monster heathen. He uses his observation eye skill to find the monster's weakness. He thinks that if that monster really reaches king level, it will gain resistance to abnormal conditions. And if the level is high enough, it might become completely immune to freezing, stunning, paralysis, and slowing. As the levels progress, even places that were originally weak points will no longer be. That's why he thinks there's no reason to keep holding back and decides to activate all his attributes. He gathers an immense amount of fire in his hand, and with a punch causes the monster tremendous pain, but it's still not enough to defeat it. The monster counterattacks, but the protagonist manages to get out of range. While Xingren takes a healing potion, the mage is impressed by the protagonist's speed. He keeps dodging and attacking like it's nothing. His movements are truly impressive, like those of a real assassin. He begins releasing even more power, thinking that as long as he can find the weakness of that king-level monster, he'll be able to reach his goal. He attacks with consecutive fireballs, causing great damage. However, he thinks that no matter what part he destroys, it will always regenerate. and he hasn't managed to identify any weakness on the monster's entire body. However, he notices the monster seems to be remotely controlled by something. When an object was removed, a trail of blood appeared, indicating that the cube had something to do with the blood nightmare. He asked the group to throw it to him. The warrior sees the block in front of him and with a three-fingered kick, makes a perfect throw. The system screen appears, saying the intelligence test was successful and that he can now decipher the ancient writing on the block. The system begins decoding the ancient enchantment on the block to break the blood curse. It is shocked and thinks the solution was right under everyone's noses. And if he had used the observation eye from the start, all of this could have been solved. The monster grabs the plaque in midair, puts it in its mouth, and enters invincible mode. The group asks why the monster is no longer moving, and the protagonist gets frustrated, saying he was too careless. Now that monster has gone into invincible mode, Shinran approaches him and asks if they've met before, because when she heard him for the first time before entering the dungeon, his voice sounded familiar. He is surprised and asks if she really didn't recognize him. He explains that he met her in the abyss 2 years ago and says he was the trash collector who took her experience point, the first one he ever earned in his life. She remembers and brings up the 29.5 points she got from that monster. So, he's that brat who took her 0.5 point. Shinran says she remembers now, but can't recall his name. She throws out a few guesses, making him a little uncomfortable, so he decides to tell her his name is Yaching. She's surprised and happy at the same time because she never imagined he'd succeed just through hard work. He confirms she's right and says he's now a level 1 collector. Shinran is amazed because he'd always risked his life for experience, slowly accumulating his points and still managed to become incredibly strong. He asks why she's looking at him like that. She smiles and says it's a little embarrassing to say it out loud. She taps her sword on the ground again and says the block will orbit around the blood nightmare's body so her control over the ice demon can freeze it for a short time. Shinran asks the protagonist to use that brief moment to locate the block. Yes, smiles and says he expected that because no matter who you are, there are always moments when you can't handle the challenge alone. With a smile on his face and confidence in his heart, he tells her to consider this as 0.5 reward and emphasizes that they'll work together to defeat that monster. She smiles and gives him a high five, saying he better not slow her down. The rest of the group yells at both of them, telling them to wait a bit because they want to join the battle too. Even if they're not much help, they want to fight with everything they've got. Yes, smiles and says it's fine, so they'll do it all together and emphasizes that they'll definitely all make it out alive. They get ready. Meanwhile, the plate starts acting inside the monster. The protagonist pays attention to this and says they still have 5 seconds until invincible mode ends. And after that, the monster will enter berserker mode and attack nonstop for 30 seconds. He turns and tells the whole group to listen carefully because these are the last 30 seconds of opportunity they'll have, and they must return alive no matter what. Even though they're very afraid, the whole group gets fired up and shouts that they'll return alive no matter what it takes. A system alert appears stating that the intelligence test was activated and the spirit boost was successful. Shinran also receives this buff, and the spirit boost on her caused her fatigue value to decrease by 100%. Her magic recovery rate increased by 15% for 30 seconds. She's surprised by these effects and turns around in disbelief. She smiles and says that it seems she really can't underestimate the protagonist. She begins to coordinate the first attack and orders the warrior to keep the monster's rage low. Without hesitation, the warrior charges at his leader's command, goes up to the front of the blood nightmare, and starts insulting it, trying to grab its attention. This works as the monster's rage is now focused on the warrior. Wasting no time, Shinran continues coordinating her team and asks the beloved to hit the monster's newly formed tentacles and cover the collector. She immediately gets to work and manages to restrain the monster for a while using her magic. Yo observes the situation and says the block with the griffin is the key to ending the blood trail, and that if it gets destroyed by the fireball, the blood trail will never end. Shinran asks what they should do. Even without being sure of what he's saying, the protagonist says maybe he can pull it out with his bare hands. Shinran is shocked by this idea and shouts that there's no way he can do that with his bare hands, questioning if he really plans to dive into the blood nightmare's stomach. Yes, starts focusing and says no. In fact, he's going to penetrate the monster's body. Still surprised and not fully understanding, she ends up agreeing and tells the archer to hit the ceiling so the falling rocks can create a platform for the protagonist to jump from. The archer says he got it and prepares, firing a powerful shot at the ceiling, causing an explosion above the monster. Shinran uses her flag again and shouts that she's going to freeze the lower half of the blood nightmare. Ye gets ready to act and says they can leave the rest to him. The two launch the attack. The monster notices this and starts attacking them as well. However, All the attacks are avoided and the protagonist charges in without fear. The reason he advances so confidently is because his super regeneration ability can instantly heal light wounds, so he can ignore minor attacks from the Blood Nightmare. Xingren drives her flag into the ground, freezing the monster and temporarily immobilizing it. He takes advantage of the opening and leaps. She shouts for him to hit the chest area, since it's the easiest to penetrate. The protagonist says he can't go that fast and activates his Berserker mode, gaining 20% more speed. He also uses his Toxic Rush skill, and the potion's effect is reversed into an additional 15% speed increase. He thinks the trash potion cards he picked up at the Abyss entrance can finally be used. A bonus effect is also granted, Hardened Skin. Defense is increased by 15%. With everything ready, he charges forward, shouting, this will be his final blow. Even with his increased speed, one of the tentacles manages to intercept him. Unable to dodge midair, he gets hit. Xingren gets worried and the protagonist is flung away. While falling, he says this is his time to shine. It was expected from a piece of trash like him, so he should have stayed low. However, he refuses to be a burden to society once again. He activates his recycling skill and says the recycling target is himself. He starts to fall, and his own skill begins trying to recycle him. The monster is confused, and so is the entire group. They begin asking what kind of power this is and where it came from. He stands up as the system notifies that it's not possible to recycle a living organism. So, the recycling fails. The protagonist laughs and tells his skill that if he can't be recycled, then he wants to be thrown away with all its might. He begins to smile, knowing his plan is about to begin. His skill throws him again toward the monster, and this time, the speed is even greater since the force of his ability is astronomical. In the blink of an eye, he pierces through the monster's body, grabbing the griffin. On the other side, with the griffin in hand, he says he did it. As he lands, the monster falls beside him, starting to melt, and the system announces that the blood trail has been completed. The monster begins to dissolve. Seeing this scene, the entire group remains stunned, asking what just happened. Xingren, also shocked, asks if they really managed to win. As reality sets in, they begin to celebrate, and the system says everyone is leveling up. Everyone's strength, agility, intelligence, determination, constitution, and luck start increasing. Xingren is also surprised to see her stats increase. Strength plus 33, agility plus 28, intelligence plus 38, détermination plus 26, constitution plus 21, and luck plus 34. Meanwhile, the system says Y failed to level up because he's already at max level and a bit embarrassed. He says that was expected. Suddenly, a treasure chest appears in the middle of them all, and the group is impressed. It's the real treasure. Once opened, several powerful cards emerge. One of them goes straight into the protagonist's hand, an extremely powerful weapon card that grants plus 88 attack. However, the required level to use it is 10. He's a little disappointed since his max level is only 1, and the system promptly notifies him that he doesn't meet the requirements. He throws the card to the ground, frustrated, saying all those shiny items he wanted so badly are now completely useless to him, and he's sad, wanting to cry. Xingren picks up some cards and calls, saying that he was the one who completed the blood trail and was undoubtedly the biggest contributor among them, so he should be the one to distribute the items. A little shy, he smiles and says it was nothing. He walks up to her and speaks more quietly, saying he has something to talk to her about. Shortly afterward, outside the portal, several agents were waiting. Their leader says they must contact the 4th General and prepare to send in a rescue team immediately. Suddenly, Xingren appears at the portal's exit, saying there's no need. She exits with the entire group intact, and the leader even sheds tears of joy seeing his lady is safe. Even reporters are there, shouting that this was expected of Miss Xingren since she managed to clear the abyss on her own. The rest of the group starts saying their goodbyes and quietly agrees to keep it all secret. She waves at everyone and in front of everyone present claims she did it all herself, asking why they were so worried and if they really thought she couldn't do all that on her own. She smiles and says that after all she's an S rank. A little earlier, still inside the abyss, she asks what the protagonist wanted to talk to her about so badly. He says her family definitely doesn't have money problems and asks if he can sell those items to her. With a discount, he charges 500 magic crystals. Even without understanding, she immediately agrees, saying it's no problem. However, he adds that there's one more thing. He asks that when they leave, she pretends he was never there and insists she take full credit for the abyss, as if she had done it all alone. Once again, she's extremely confused, but agrees with what he just said. He turns and begins to say goodbye to her, saying they can go ahead and he'll leave secretly afterward. Shinran agrees to everything. However, she's a bit uneasy, thinking the protagonist is setting her up to owe him a favor. Once everyone leave the abyss and everything is quiet, Yet takes the griffin and sits alone on the ground. He extends his hand, sensing something. And as a small piece of the blood nightmare appears, he smiles. He leans down and tells the little nightmare that even something weak like him doesn't want to be trash and let others decide for him. So he offers the nightmare to become part of his strength. He captures the blood nightmare with his skill, and suddenly a message appears. Recycling successful. Blood nightmare skill acquired. Humanoid nightmare consumes life essence to summon a nightmare clone. The clone can imitate the host by dealing or receiving damage. It will dissipate immediately after the effect is triggered. This skill can be upgraded. Cooldown time, 305. Upon seeing the full description, the protagonist says it's a great skill and that in future battles, he's really looking forward to working together with the nightmare. Sometime later, in another place, the protagonist is sitting at a table drinking coffee while analyzing his card system. He thinks about how he gave all the higher requirement items to Shinran. However, now that he thinks a bit more about it, an unknown collector holding several shiny pieces of equipment would definitely be noticed by a group of supervisors. However, all that trash he's been wearing is so unnoticeable that the supervisors wouldn't even care, even if he were selling in secret. He leans back in the chair and takes a deep breath, thinking he's overthinking it because no one would buy that trash anyway. Absent-mindedly, while holding his cup, he touches the recycle button, and suddenly the system shows that one piece of equipment was recycled. BP gained basic point. Upon seeing that, he's a bit surprised and questions whether he really recycled an item by accident. A bit doubtful, he goes to read the tutorial. The tutorial says that recycling is done by processing the selected trash. And after a preliminary classification, BP is a universal substance extracted from recycling useless equipment, which can be used for improvement, repair, and crafting of new items. Ya is very surprised to realize that those pieces of junk equipment can be recycled. The tutorial system gives him a task, asking him to complete the repair of the common dagger. A bit confused, he wonders if he really needs to complete the task. Following the hints, the tutorial informs him that repairing the common dagger costs 5 BP. He sees that the remaining durability of the dagger is 0.33, and he had almost thrown it away after killing the boss. He says that if he counts the BP from that accidental recycling, then he still needs 4 more. He begins recycling some trash weapons, and says he needs to recycle at least 4 more. Once he gathers the necessary amount, he repairs his common dagger. However, he gets a surprise. The weapon wasn't just repaired, but the durability and attack also increased a bit. The system shows that the common dagger now has a durability of 34 THS. Before, the max was 33. In other words, 1 point was added. The requirement is still level 1. The attack, which was previously 21, has now increased to 22. The repair rewards were weapon max durability +1, attack +1. Upon seeing this information, he thinks, in other words, that while equipment is constantly used and repaired, even trash items can be improved. He smiles and says that apparently bad equipment needs to be reinforced to improve. The system congratulates him for completing the tutorial and asks him to choose a reward. The first option is a beginner's blueprint, a convenient magic potion that can instantly recover someone's mana while removing a large amount of fatigue. Or the second option, a random attribute value +2. He starts reflecting a bit and thinks that at the moment, attribute points are not scarce for him. What worries him most when venturing into the abyss is that he can't predict its depth, and many adventurers who are unprepared often run out of mana before reaching the boss room and need to backtrack to resupply. As a result, mana flasks are usually key survival tools for a group, and the value of those flasks speaks for itself. He ends up choosing the potion, and the system appears again saying, "Tip, congratulations. You have learned item regeneration." However, on the card he received for the flask, it's written convenient magic potion blueprint. The protagonist wonders why it's a blueprint. The system appears again, saying that the regeneration requirements for the convenient magic potion are 6 BP plus a random container. He starts thinking that it's not surprising an item's regeneration would need BP, but he is surprised to learn it also needs a random container. He raises his hand and calls the attendant, asking if he could provide a small container. The attendant hands him 3 disposable cups. With everything in hand, he begins his production. In no time, he manages to recycle the trash completely. And now the next step is regeneration. However, he's surprised to see that even within his system, there is a focused mini-aim to do everything perfectly. He draws the attendant's attention, who doesn't understand what he's doing, talking to himself at the table. A few minutes later, all the cups are filled with potions. He picks up one of the cups and says, That's what you'd expect from a recycled item. It's a bit weird, but it's not like it's unusable. He starts drinking, and the system announces that he gained convenient magic potion X5. However, he starts to feel a bit sick, shouting that it tastes like some kind of rancid juice. But instantly, he begins to feel something happening in his body. The system announces that his mana has increased and his fatigue has decreased. He says it's amazing as he can feel his mana completely restored and his fatigue simply gone. He stores the potion cups in his inventory and leaves the shop thinking that now he should be able to complete another abyss that day. But as soon as he exits the shop, two people were waiting for him outside. A bald man asks if he is yachting. The protagonist becomes a bit suspicious, so he decides to remain silent. The man who asked his name says it's only been a few days and his aura has already changed completely. The bald guy touches his shoulder and smiles, asking if he found any treasure while collecting trash. He points out that he's been looking for the protagonist for a while and almost reported him missing a few days ago. Yes, says he paid off all his debts with interest on debit, so he asked the man not to bother him anymore. The bald guy asks the others to leave, extinguishes the cigarette he was smoking in the protagonist's drink, and hugs him, asking if he really thinks that's all there is. He points out that maybe Yed did pay all the bills, but his work contract hasn't expired yet, and adds that the protagonist shouldn't forget that a trash collector should live like a trash collector. The man starts getting angry and says, is acting like he's something special, asking who he's trying to impress. With a slap, he knocks the protagonist's drink to the ground, but then he starts screaming, asking how blind because he just spilled the bald guy's drink, the sacred brown sugar pearl. People nearby also shout, saying that a level 0 knocked over a rank be awakened and question whether he understands the consequences. The henchmen get ready and say they've always been disgusted by the sight of him. The protagonist looks at a nearby camera and thinks that according to the supervisor regulations for awakens, using abilities outside the abyss is forbidden. The only ones allowed to activate their abilities outside the abyss are law enforcers, such as the special police. Therefore, he needs to find a blind spot in the security cameras to activate his recycling and regeneration abilities. The bald guy makes a proposal and asks what he thinks about picking up the pearls from the ground and eating them one by one. And then, when done licking up the puddle of milk tea from the floor, he starts laughing mockingly, saying he's offering this trash collection job opportunity because, after all, it's a rare job opportunity. Already irritated with the situation, says he refuses, and that's enough for the bald guy to charge at him, asking who he thinks he is. However, someone starts approaching. This person is so powerful that upon getting close, the bald guy starts trembling. That man is Rodrigo, known as Caesar, from the S-rank hunting group Blood Oath. Caesar grabs the bald guy by the tie and asks if he's gathered enough people. The bald guy, trembling, says he's almost there. Only one person left. Caesar starts getting irritated and asks where the last person is. Suddenly, he turns and calls the protagonist, saying he's hired. The bald guy says that kid is just a trash collector. The protagonist observes the two, and the bald guy keeps saying that the kind of person Caesar wants should be someone who could defend himself and promises to find that person right away. Caesar replies that when entering the abyss under the Red Moon state, all monsters become extremely fierce, and what he really needs is someone who can be used as bait. So, the individual's strength doesn't matter. Upon hearing about the Red Moon, the protagonist begins thinking that during that state, monsters in the abyss go into a frenzy. Rare monsters also appear, rewards are doubled, and the quality of the magic crystals is purer. Seeing this great opportunity, he thinks for just a moment and already gets excited, saying he wants to be part of it. Caesar says that's an excellent answer and emphasizes that he likes the protagonist's determination. He calls everyone else to gather, and suddenly the protagonist hears a shout. Locken appears behind him, saying it's him. But before he can say anything else, Y charges at him, telling him to shut up. With that, they start fighting in front of everyone. The protagonist drags him to a corner, and a bit more calmly they try to talk. Lao Chun, still scared, shouts that he's not hallucinating and emphasizes that the protagonist really is that guy. He explains that if he hadn't borrowed everyone's strength that time, they all would have died inside the abyss. It's thanks to him that Lao Chun is alive now. Caesar appears from behind the wall, asking if the two know each other. But the protagonist says no. Caesar turns and says that answer makes sense, because how could someone who killed his own teammates have any real friends? He asks Lao Chun how he managed to get out. He starts shouting that the committee originally planned to sentence him to 15 years, but he sacrificed all his assets and paid a 1.5 million fine to be released. He keeps saying that it's all the protagonist's fault, and now he has no money left and lost all his levels. So, he has to start over from scratch like trash. He continues yelling and threatens the protagonist, saying that if he doesn't return his levels, he'll report him to the World Committee. Y begins to release his aura and stares directly at Lao Chun, saying he dares him to say anything to anyone because if he does, he'll truly be turned into trash and recycled. Sometime later in the city subway, the three were arriving at the portal. Upon arrival, a level 3 bard named Jo Tong welcomes the protagonist to the disposable team. He asks what his job is. Y says he's a level 1 collector and his name is Yaching. Lao Chun also introduces himself, saying he's a level 1 mage. Jo Tong walks up to the protagonist and says, "That's normal because they're all trash there, so there's no need to mock each other. After all, they're all there to trade their lives for money, and there's nothing nobler than that." Yet looks at that guy beside him and thinks that apparently this trash team will really be going with him. Jo Tong keeps talking and says he'll introduce the other 2 disposable teammates. They stress that they need to choose a leader for the small disposable team. As a level 3 bard, he believes he's the most qualified for the role. A level 2 healer named Lao Zhu tells Jo Tong that he's the highest level among them, so it's fine by him. Another group member is a level 3 warrior named Lao Jiang. He says it's fine by him too. Caesar begins to speak, saying he's going to announce something. Besides the 6 main members of Blood Oath, there will be 5 temporary members accompanying them this time. One of the Blood Oath members asks Caesar not to speak so loudly about the disposables. Another member says, "Once disposable, always disposable," mocking the rest of the awakened. Disposables are used as bait to reduce the losses of the main members. Caesar continues explaining that this abyss has the form of a labyrinth with various traps distributed in each room. He emphasizes that the disposables have the duty to find a passage to the boss room as quickly as possible and bring the information back to the main team. He starts laughing and opens the labyrinth, saying he doesn't expect any of them to have combat skills. So, if they encounter a monster, just run. In addition to all that, he explains that if they really want share of the money, at least one of them must survive, because if only one survives, that person will get all the rewards. The healer starts to cheer, and the warrior asks if he's feeling okay. However, Lao Zhu says that doesn't matter because he can't give up since he still has 4 daughters waiting for him to bring dinner home. The warrior sighs, saying his wife is seriously ill and needs money, and begins to question what other reason he would have to accept this kind of job. As the portal